Pardon the interruption. I'm Chris Gehrz, joined by...
I'm Amy Poppinga.
And I'm Sam Mulberry.
And we are your instructors for the summer 2020, I almost said season, but I guess it's like class or term of GES 130, Christianity and Western Culture, which we'll hereafter always call CWC. So this is our first webisode. We're going to talk about what these webisodes are, how they fit into the rest of the class, what it looks like to do this class online. But let's get started. Amy, can you just give us an introduction to what is CWC? What does it cover? Why do students take it? What do we hope they get out of it?
I absolutely will. This is a question I get, almost every day, often just some random passerby. But CWC stands for Christianity and Western Culture. And truly, when someone will ask me, what do you teach at Bethel? And I mention this class, I say, well, most colleges and universities have a Western Civ requirement, and everybody nods and everybody's like, oh yeah, that Western Civ requirement. And so it's not unusual that students take a class that covers the development of Western civilization. And that's because we live in Western civilization. So whether or not you are the product of Western civilization, you're somebody that is a native to it, that grew up in this environment, it is the one that we live in. And so I explain that a study of Western Civ kind of helps us understand where we've sort of come from as somebody who, for me, lives in Western civilization, but also gets us to think about how it's like gotten us to where we are now. The triumphs, the failures, things that have gone well, things that have gone really wrong. What makes it different at Bethel is the fact that we are looking at the history of Christianity, the religion of Christianity, the Christian community, which at Bethel, we see ourselves as a part of that. And I see myself as a Christian as a part of that. What is the history of Christianity in the development of Western civilization? And I point out, it's not just that Christianity only developed as it moved to the West throughout history, but this is the particular story that we're telling in this class. And so we cover information. We have to start pre-Christianity. We can't just sort of start with, say, the birth of Christ and the life and teaching of Christ, but we have to go back. We have to understand that world into which Christ was born. So we are going to go all the way back to thinking about, that classical Greek poet Homer, and start with the development of Greek civilization. And then we're going to sort of really look at what was the Mediterranean world like when Christ comes onto the scene. And then we will spend the rest of our time together studying what happened after the life of Christ, what happened after he handed his ministry over to people who were going to follow in his name. And so we're going to trace that story throughout Western civilization, which then will eventually sort of wind up with right here in America. And, if somebody says, well, what are you supposed to get out of that? I would say that there's kind of two main things I think about. Now, number one is to understand more about history that I think sometimes gets easily overlooked, thinking about things from a philosophical viewpoint and how philosophy develops over the last 1,000+ years. Think about how theology develops, think about how history develops. But then specifically as a Christian, I want students to be able to understand how they are connected to the Christian story. So for some of us, we have these like really important family histories that we hold on to. We know where we're from. We know our family, maybe we still have ethnic and cultural traditions that have been a part of our family for a long time. Some of us, like me, actually don't have that. It's just not something that has been a part of my family story. But as a Christian, I am an inheritor of Christian heritage. And I think that one of the things I want anyone who calls themselves Christian to understand and to, I think, be encouraged by, but also wrestle with, is how Christian communities have solved conflicts, how they sometimes have been the creator of conflict and the damage that we sometimes have caused to other communities as a result of that. Who's been on the inside? Who's been on the outside? How do we think about our relationship with authority as it relates to Christianity? What do we think about Scripture? What do we think about the role of Jesus in our lives? And what do we see as our responsibilities to others? And so we have to kind of really look to our Christian past to recognize, no, there is no new question. When can we draw inspiration? When do we maybe need to be the ones doing the correction? But ultimately, I think almost every day is about when do we need to be really listening to a sense of conviction?
Right. I think that I was just talking about this with faculty here. I was doing a workshop, and one thing I said is, like, this class has taught me so much about where my faith comes from, what my obligations are, and it's such a rich tapestry. Like, we'll talk about a big idea in the class is the cloud of witnesses, which comes from Hebrews 12, verses 1 and 2. And we'll talk more about this in the second segment of the webisode, and we'll meet a few of the people that we'll talk about in the class. But yeah, there's a sense in which it's kind of reassuring. Like, you've got all these people, many of whom are very impressive, much more impressive thinkers than I am. It's frustrating sometimes because they always disagree with each other. It's a cacophony of contentious debate. I mean, it kind of reminds me of church, though. I mean, it's a little bit like being part of a congregation, except unlike in the Midwest, they actually argue with each other, not passive aggressively, but aggressively. And I think actually it's one thing that's really important to learn from the class is how to argue well and how to listen well to each other when we disagree within the body of Christ. And then as we encounter people from outside of the church too. I think one thing that I like about this is that it adds on Christianity to Western Civ, but it doesn't lose the fact that Western Civ is not synonymous with Christianity, that Western Civ interacts with other kinds of civilizations. And we hear some other kinds of voices along the way that help enrich the conversation, move it in new directions, whether that's Muslim scholastics in the Middle Ages, the early Greek thinkers who predate Christ, or as we get to the end of the class, we'll talk about the modern age, and you have the 19th century figures like Freud and Darwin and Nietzsche, who really are going to challenge where we had left off the Christian story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I really love about this class is the fact that, as both of you are talking about, you talk about we're going to meet these people, things like that, that we're actually going to get to read their words, and we're going to get to see what mattered to them. And we're going to see that in some ways, what matters to Christians shifts over time, changes over time. But at the same time, as Amy was pointing out, these are universal questions.
Yeah. And I think that also something that we really try to do as we go along is, as much as we're paying attention to who is speaking and who we get to hear from in writing and who we get to study because they've left these quote marks on history, we also have to pay attention to, well, who are we not hearing from? And why aren't we hearing certain voices? Why aren't we able to look back and really sort of see the evidence of certain populations and certain people as speaking in? And that's just as important as the people that we are actually able to read their words.
So we all teach CWC and have taught this course for many years, but this in the summer is a little bit different, right? This is an online course. Chris, can you maybe talk a little bit about why do CWC online? What's the value added maybe in taking this course online?
Right. I mean, this is an unusual summer, obviously. We would be doing this online even if we normally were doing it face-to-face. But summer CWC for 7 years now has always been taught online. And so the contrast just helps students understand how it's different. With this, where in the fall or the spring and we're in a normal non-COVID semester, you would be having 2 big group lectures of like 140 students and 1 professor on Friday and Monday, and then a small group with like 15 to 18 students on a Wednesday or Thursday. And you'd have that mix of face-to-face interactions. When we thought about moving it online this summer, Bethel had already moved a lot of summer classes online, and we decided to go in that direction, partly just for flexibility. Summer is a time when you're not living on campus. You probably have other things going on, and we'll talk about how to balance those. A lot of you probably have a job that you're working, or you might be traveling at some point. And so one thing we'll want you to think about is how to balance those commitments, because we do expect as much out of you in this as in the fall or the spring. You'll see in the syllabus that the basic standard is you're working 3 hours outside of class for every hour in class. So this is one of your primary jobs right now. But it does give you a little bit of flexibility. You don't have to be in a certain place at a certain time in order to do this. If it works well for you to do this in the evening or early in the morning before your job, that's up to you. I think one thing that's nice is that this is a Western Civ course, and it's a history of Christianity course, and 3 of us are historians. But this is really a multidisciplinary course. And even though the 3 of us are historians, the way we've set things up with documentary films, with the different reading packets, with the museum that you'll visit, you're going to hear from a lot of non-historians too. In fact, by the time it's done, you'll probably hear from something like 20 Bethel faculty from different disciplines, including some that normally never get to teach in CWC. Scientists and artists and biblical scholars who aren't part of our usual teaching team. You get to encounter the kind of breadth and diversity of our faculty. And that might actually be helpful for a lot of reasons, one of which is you might kind of see, oh, This is what it's like to be a chemist at a place like Bethel. This is what it's like to study the Old Testament at a place like Bethel. And that might help you get a kind of sense of what Bethel is like as you enter it. Because I know a lot of you, this might be your first Bethel experience. I think the other thing is that it puts a lot of the onus of learning on you. Right? That when you're on campus and you're face to face, at least in those sessions, there's some sense you're being held accountable. You've got a professor kind of to like get cues from you of how you're processing things. We'll do things to try to hear from you, to try to gauge how you're learning, but this really does shift the onus to you. Like, you get to decide how you learn, especially in the museums. There'll be a lot of points where we'll say, kind of go off in the direction you want to go, learn about something you're interested in. So it gives you more freedom, but also does give you more responsibility. Like, you really have to take ownership of your own learning here. This is not simply passively sitting by and letting someone else dictate it to you. You're going to have to decide how you're going to use this course well. And so in a second, we'll talk about how you can do online learning well. What about the two of you? You've each taught online CWC for a while now, and we should add, just did some online teaching that we wouldn't normally have done because of what happened in the spring semester here at Bethel.
What I really love about the online course compared to the face-to-face course is because it is really learner directed to a large degree. I mean, we'll talk about museums in a little bit. I mean, literally, these are virtual spaces you can move through and you can make choices in it. So we get to do things that are not as linear, maybe. And if you listen to a lecture, the lecturer is deciding, here's what I'm going to show you. Here's the linear story I'm going to tell you. When you get into those museums, you get to explore, which also means we get to just add things in that we find interesting. So it's like, well, this is an interesting little topic that if I was giving a lecture, I might not stop and talk about because we'd have to take time out of the lecture and it would be like a little rabbit trail. We've been able to include a lot of those rabbit trails in here because when you go into those museums, you're not required to look at it and listen to everything in there. But if something interests you, if you see something like, I'd like to know more about that, we have it there. So I think that's one of my favorite things about the online course.
I will say that mine is similar. I think that online provides some opportunities to sort of like linger in spaces, which is what you've just sort of described, that we get to use different types of content in the summer that I always feel are actually a little bit special. And what I really have appreciated about teaching CWC online is that, we ask a lot of the exact same questions. The themes are the same. The big ideas are the same. But in summer, I always enjoy how in students' engagement with the material, they get to bring out and focus on some examples that I don't even think about during the regular semester. So again, it is a very personalized experience. I mean, it's sort of like we want you to feel a part of the group here. And at the same time, it's really sort of you and the content. And I think that, again, because of our objectives of saying, really, who am I as a Christian and who am I as a member of this historic community, you kind of actually get to personalize that. And I think be more thoughtful about it in a way that is maybe easier. And to Chris's point about I'm sure everybody has got distractions and you're working and you're dealing with, summer life, whatever that means for you. But most people are pretty singularly focused and this is their one class, or maybe it's one of two. And there's something that can really be special about that as well.
No, it's true. So we've alluded to a few pieces of the course so far. We've mentioned virtual museums. I think there are about 7 of those. You're going to have some short documentary films that, in a sense, take the place of lectures. They kind of tell the story. They ask the big questions of the course. But why are we doing these webisodes, Sam? What's the point of this CWC TV show that we're producing here?
Well, it really is to take the place of another piece of face-to-face CWC. So as Chris mentioned, in a normal CWC semester, you would have a lecture on Monday and Friday, and you'd have a small group. Now, it's easy for the museums and the documentary films to replace the lecture. This is sort of the content, the story, these types of things. But what we thought a lot about was, how do we replace small group? Because small group is a chance for students to interact, for students to ask questions, for us to go deeper into a reading, and also to kind of pull pieces together. So one of the things is, as I think about the function of these webisodes. It's to say, okay, you just learned a whole bunch of material, and this course is very difficult if you think about, you can go look at the study guide. If you think about every term on that study guide as a discrete little packet of information you need to know, it can feel overwhelming and complex really quickly. But what we're going to try to do on the webisodes in part is to think about connections a little bit. Well, how do these things fit together? How are these readings in conversation with each other? So if you understand one and you understand the conversation, that really means you understand this other. And that's where this course moves from a bunch of information you need to learn to really these historical conversations that we're having. And this is our chance to do that with you. So you will see your 3 instructors for this course engaged in conversation. And one of the things, you can see it on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen right now, you see an email address. Please, if you have things you want us to talk about on the next webisode, email me, s-mulberry@bethel.edu, and we will dig into that. So as you're reading, as things pop up, make sure you're asking questions, because we would love for you guys to drive some of this content. What do you guys see as the sort of things that this webisode functions as, the value students can get out of these?
Well, I love the fact that I think sometimes, and these were my own misconceptions maybe about teaching online, is that it's just sort of static, that like you create this thing and you just regurgitate it every time you teach it. And it's like a distance course, which doesn't mean a lot to probably our students, but back in the day where here's the content, when you get around to it, respond to it, email it back to me, and that's what I love about our webisodes. We film them each week. They're new. They're just for you. They are, again, to Sam's point, hopefully incorporating your questions, things that you tell us. So this is a living course. I mean, it will change throughout the semester, both because of the current events and what's happening in society around us. And that's something we try to bring in, as well as to all of our hairstyles, because we usually all kind of look different, especially right now. Some of us have gotten haircuts. Some of us are desperately waiting till next week. But, it's a reminder that like, nope, this is live, this is ongoing. And it creates another type of kind of special connection, I think.
Yeah, and I think it is important to see your professors as individuals with distinct personalities. I'm sure our fingerprints are all over lots of things that you'll encounter in the class, even if we're not there necessarily. But I think there's something powerful, first of all, just about seeing kind of grown-ups who are excited about this stuff, right? And I think it's probably more powerful if you're live and in person. That's why a lecture really is a powerful thing to me, and why small group works so well. But this is not a bad substitute for it. To see 3 people who know each other well, kind of just talking about things that matter to them, and talking about why history is an important thing to do, and philosophy and theology and art history and social science are important things for liberally educated people to do. And sometimes that's important to see if you're 18, 19, or 20. It was really important for me to see in college, and I didn't even get to go to Bethel. I wish I had. And also just to see that we're mildly goofy kinds of people too. Like, I think there's always a danger in any kind of education that the people who are up front really are these authority figures. There's a degree of power that you have over students, right? And that's necessary. And I also constantly want to diffuse that as much as we can, because we are also learning alongside you, and we're getting things wrong as we go. So that's something I appreciate about the webisodes.
And I just want to say about that is one of the things I value the most about this in the summer, is that it's good for students to see people who are friends be able to sometimes disagree, be able to sometimes push each other. And sometimes we're pushing each other because we're actually just doing that because we want you to learn as students, and we want you to see multiple perspectives and multiple sides. But I think that is something that's good to model, is we're here to sharpen each other. And we're able to do that because we care about each other. But to do it in a way that demonstrates that we can disagree, but we can walk away from it and try to decide where to have lunch.
So Chris, as students are thinking about preparing to take this course, what are things they should be thinking about as this course is kicking off?
Right. I mean, first of all, I'm hopeful that this is maybe a bit of an easier transition, simply because I would guess everyone who's taking this course now has done some online learning, if only because whether you were in high school or at Bethel or another college or university, you just spend some time online. Now, this is a pretty distinctive online course. This is not going to have narrated PowerPoints, recorded lectures, things like that. So part of the challenge is just figuring out, how do you take notes with a 40-minute documentary film? And how do you fill out these museum worksheets and prepare for an exam as you're going through museums? So, I mean, partly you just need to understand that the first couple of weeks, the first unit of the course, you're learning how to learn in this environment too, alongside the content you're trying to learn. But that's true of any class. If you're face-to-face, you'd be learning how to adjust to a professor's teaching style. The other big thing is, as with any class, it's how do you manage your time well? You're not going to give endless amounts of time to this, but you do need to give some significant chunk of time. And usually it's helpful to have some kind of regularity to that, whether it's face-to-face or online. What is going to be the time in the day, the times in the week when you're working on this material? Partly so that you don't get into the trap of, I'm going to push this off till later, right? And then you find yourself rushing through something. And it's especially important if you are going to have some significant disruptions to that regular schedule. If like your family is going somewhere, for a weekend, that's fine. You need to understand you are still responsible to be a student in this class and to get your work done. So you're going to have to figure out whether it's working ahead, and we'll always make stuff available ahead of time, getting internet while you're up at the cabin, but you are still responsible for doing that. And I think that can be a pretty distinctive challenge, not just of the online, but of the summer part of CWC. What are some other things you guys have learned, whether it's from doing this class in the summer or even from teaching this past spring, of what helps students do well in an online environment?
I think that number one, really stay on top of things. Look at the week as a whole. This is not a class where one thing is due at the end of each week. I mean, we are sort of in it with you almost every day. And so getting behind can happen pretty easily, and it makes it very hard to catch back up because of the abbreviated nature of the course. So just recognize that it's not a lighter workload because it's in the summer. You have to really be good at self-management and staying on top of daily assignments.
Yeah, I would say the other piece of advice I would have, and this is just good advice for any classes, even though this is an online course, and even though, we talked about we're doing these webisodes periodically, like, reach out to us. If you have questions, reach out to us, email us. We can set up a Google Hangout or a Zoom meet, or just email back and forth if you have questions about things. Just because we're at a distance doesn't mean you need to be on an island. And the other thing I would say is, when you are writing, you're going to be doing a lot of like daily writing and things like this. Pay attention to the feedback we give. I mean, I will, especially early in the semester, I know I will probably write more in my response to your answers than you wrote in your answers, because I want to make sure ideas are clear. So if you look at the feedback as only this is the grade I got, like, you're probably missing a piece. Even if you got 10 out of 10, look, there might be some feedback there to help you think about those things. So I would say be looking for feedback, and please reach out to us. Please interact with us. And you don't need to wait until you're struggling to interact. If you're really excited about an idea, contact one of us. Let's talk about it.
So we've alluded to a few of the kinds of assignments you'll have to do in the class. You'll be doing kind of short response papers, like 250 to 300 words. You'll be doing worksheets where you answer open-ended questions about museums. Of course, you've got tests in this class. And so one thing we'll have you do before a class starts on the 17th is to actually go through the syllabus, to schedule the study guide, and to do an online quiz on Moodle. You can do this as many times as you want, but by the end of the day on June 17th, you need to have completed that. One other kind of assignment we're trying for the first time this summer is video responses. And your first one is also due on the 17th as kind of your introduction to the course. So Amy, tell us about Flipgrid and how we're going to use it in that specific assignment.
Sure. So we're going to be using Flipgrid, which is an online media learning platform that we think is a more effective way to get you to be able to engage in discussion, wrestle with your ideas, ask good questions, as opposed to necessarily just always doing it in writing. So this is a little bit new to us, but we think it's going to work really well. So you will find on our main Moodle site for our class, you will find an information that you will access under the course information line in the opening box for how to sort of understand Flipgrid. And then you will be put into a Flipgrid Flipgrid group that corresponds with your particular professor. So you'll either be in the Poppinga small group, the Gehrz small group, or the Mulberry small group. And so we'll be using Flipgrid to do discussion responses, and you will, it's pretty intuitive. You're welcome to ask questions, but you will access your Flipgrid by the links that we provide for you. And we have an introductory Flipgrid for you. So your very first Flipgrid assignment, it's going to be really succinct. Videos will be around 2 minutes, but we're going to ask you just to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are, tell us maybe where you're studying from, where are you going to be for the next couple of weeks. But then we'll also be just asking you for what experience you have with online learning. So both what kind of things have you studied online? How did that go for you? What did you like about it? What was challenging? Maybe what you think makes for a good online course. And as Dr. Gehrz said, those are going to be due by 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday, June 17th.
Right, so we'll do this. The class is broken into 3 different units of time. So we start with the ancient world, the early church. And so your next one will be with the next webisode, which I think is June 22nd. So generally, we'll do 2 webisodes per unit. And in the first webisode, you'll have a Flipgrid response to do. So you'll be doing, I think, a total of 4 of these over the course of the summer. And that'll go into your grade alongside worksheets, responses, and other things. So do your Flipgrid video, do your syllabus quiz by the end of the day on the 17th. And we'll remind you of that before this webisode is done. We're going to take a break. We'll come back and start to meet a few of the people that you will learn about in CWC.
Welcome back to segment 2. We're going to often use segment 2 to dive a little bit deeper. Sometimes we'll play games, we'll have debates, things to help us sort of look at the content from a different direction. So today we're going to play a little game we call Heads on Sticks. And this is to help introduce both some of the people we're going to study in this course, but also to introduce a big idea for this course. So this course has been in existence since the mid-1980s. So I took this class in 1995 when I was a freshman at Bethel. And one of the things that goes all the way back to the creation of this course is what the sort of theme verse for CWC is, and that is Hebrews 11 through 12:1. So Hebrews 11 is the sort of list of the faithful, right? So the author goes through and talks about, all of the people of faith throughout the Old Testament, going all the way back to Abraham and all the way up through the Old Testament. And then it ends, as we move into Hebrews 12:1, with this really powerful image. It says, after talking about all the people of faith that have come before, it says, "Therefore, since you are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us run the race that's laid out before us." So this idea that everyone who came before us, all of the people of faith, all the people that we're studying, that they came before us, they're like up in the clouds looking down on us as we're now taking the baton from them and running our race. And this image of the cloud of witnesses really has become a theme for how we think about this course. One of the things we're trying to do is introduce students to more people who are in their cloud of witnesses. So one of our goals is to expand your sense of who those folks are looking down on you, who came before you. In this game, Heads on Sticks, we are going to do a little bit of role playing. We're going to play some characters and talk about who they might include in their cloud of witnesses. So, Chris,
before we get started, I was explaining to my daughter what we were doing today, and I described this game, and she said, "Oh, do you call it Heads on Sticks?" I kind of sheepishly had to say, "Yes, that's exactly what it is." So I'll get started. Sam, who am I?
You are Dr. Anthony Fauci.
I am, I think, pretty well known to you all. You've seen me a few times this past spring talking about the coronavirus and COVID-19 and epidemiology. So you're probably expecting that I'm going to talk about someone from the history of science, right? Some of the history of medicine, biology, chemistry, something like that. But you know what, Sam? You'll appreciate this because I know you went to a Catholic high school. I was educated by the Jesuits, the Society of Jesus, both at high school and then at the College of Holy Cross in Massachusetts. And in fact, I took biology and math and chemistry, but I also took things like philosophy and theology and ancient history and classics, art history, and it really shaped me and cultivated empathy in me. And so my cloud of witnesses would definitely include someone like Ignatius Loyola, who is Basque. He was born in Spain and was a kind of soldier of fortune, had a conversion experience in 1521, and decided to found a new monastic order called the Society of Jesus. And unlike some of the other monastic orders, the Jesuits went out into the world. They didn't live in a cloister. They became lawyers and teachers and missionaries, and they became doctors and scientists and social workers and activists. And I really found that a very powerful thing. That I'm not a member of the clergy myself, but there is a sense in which the Jesuits taught me to make my faith active, to start with contemplation, with prayer and meditation and study, but then to go out and to serve others, whether it's as an educator, as a priest, as a doctor. And so Ignatius Loyola is definitely in my cloud of witnesses.
Fantastic. Chris, who am I?
Sam, you are the novel coronavirus. You've been spreading disease around the world. Who is in your cloud of witnesses?
Well, since I am not a person in my cloud of witnesses, I am not going to have a person, but I'm going to have something kind of like me, which is another global pandemic that we're going to talk about in this course. In the 14th century, the world is overtaken by a disease known as the bubonic plague, the Black Death, and this is really, really significant to history. We're going to see huge death tolls. Anywhere from a quarter to a third of the population of Europe is going to be wiped out in a matter of about 2 years. And this is going to have a deep, deep impact on the world. It's going to cause people to ask questions, to say, why is this happening to us? In the Christian West, there are going to be people who are going to say, is this God's judgment on us? Well, how should we respond to this? And what I find really interesting is that in the same way all of you out there are talking about me in terms of how I'm going to impact the economy and the world going forward, that's exactly what we see happen with the bubonic plague and the Black Death. It's going to totally reorient the way we think about the economic relationships coming out of the Middle Ages, and it's going to help lead to the end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of a new time period. So definitely in my cloud of witnesses, the Black Plague.
Yeah, history doesn't repeat, but it certainly rhymes. Okay,
That's
Sam,
right.
who am I?
You are new Bethel President Ross Allen.
I feel like I'm kind of out of focus a little bit. Wonder what's wrong with my computer. So I'm just starting my job here at Bethel University, and honestly, I'm a little bit of a mystery to people, and I don't want to give away too much. But I'll say this: I was a business major at Bethel back in the 1980s. I can't remember if I took CWC or not, or its predecessor. And then mostly my career was in business at places like Medtronic. And even as I come into higher education, that business background is important. It's maybe some experience and some knowledge I can bring. So I think my cloud of witnesses has to include someone like the Scottish economist and philosopher Adam Smith, who in the 18th century, in the middle of the Enlightenment, was trying to think rationally about human economic behavior. Why do we buy? Why do we sell? Why do we produce? Why do we consume? What are prices? What is the nature of the market? And I think that's probably a good thing for us to do at Bethel or at Medtronic, is to think rationally about economic behavior. And you know what? Smith also is aware of some of the problems there. Smith, for example, placed a great deal of emphasis on education because he was worried that the new industrial economy that England was entering would not create virtue. It would create the wrong kind of citizen. It would create people who really just did this numbing, repetitive job. And so education had an important role to play in a world that was governed by the laws of supply and demand. And so, as someone who's now an educational leader, I want to think well about what we can learn from business, but also what education, what kind of people we're preparing in a place like Bethel. How was that? That was my best Ross Allen impersonation. As far as I know, it was great.
Spot on is what I have to say. Chris, who am I?
Well, I thought you had just left, but it looks like you're Amy Poppinga, Sam.
That's right. I am a professor in CWC. I am also a Bethel grad, like Ross Allen. And in my cloud of witnesses, there's so many people that I could potentially talk about, but I want to highlight one of my favorite people that we study in this course, and that is the 16th century Spanish nun Teresa of Avila. And I admire her for a number of things. For one thing, she is a woman who is a really important leader in the church. She is a figure in the Catholic Reformation. So while the Protestant movement is sort of ripping apart Western Christianity in the 16th century, Teresa is looking at how do we reform, especially monastic movements from within. One of the other things I love about Teresa is that she's a brilliant woman, but she's also a mystic, which means she receives these sort of direct revelations from God. So she gives us a picture of a broader understanding of spirituality, right? That it's easy in an academic setting to think about Christianity as something that's sort of just these theology essays that we read and things like this. But Teresa is saying, well, maybe there are ways of knowing that don't line up with that, right? Maybe there are these other ways, and she's open to a sort of a broader sense of how we understand God. Another big idea from Teresa that I admire is that she looks at Christianity as something that's supposed to be transformative in a person. In the essay that we're going to read from her, she uses this metaphor of death and rebirth. She talks about the silkworm going into its cocoon and coming out as a new creature, being reborn. So that sort of transformative power of Christianity is going to be central to her. She's also a figure who I associate a lot with hospitality. And if you get to know me, Amy Poppinga, you will know that I am one of the most hospitable people you will ever meet. And so she's sort of a great image of that as well.
She is. All right, Sam, who am I?
Wow, I am unfamiliar with who you are. It looks like I am staring into a mirror. You are me, Sam Mulberry.
Yeah. It's not a big difference. So there's a resemblance to start with. But yeah, I'm Sam Mulberry. Like Ross Allen and Amy Poppinga, I am a Bethel grad. I took CWC and I TA'd for the course, and I've taught it for a long time now. And so there are a lot of people I feel like I could talk about, but I do think a lot about the 17th century French mathematician, scientist, and philosopher Blaise Pascal. Partly because when I came to Bethel from Faribault, Minnesota, I was going to be a computer science major. And Pascal is one of the founding fathers of the discipline of computer science. But because of CWC, I had a kind of conversion experience and became a history major instead. And here I sit doing webisodes for CWC in the year 2020. But I'm still struck by Pascal in the midst of the scientific revolution, but also in the aftermath of the Reformation, is think about what it means to be a Christian in an age of reason. And he refuses to be drawn into kind of polar opposites. Like you've got to choose between faith and reason, religion and science. He wants to say these are different modes of knowing. You know, there's a sense in which Christians really ought to be doing good science, that they really ought to learn from mathematics and from rational ways of knowing. But he also wants to warn that that can't be the only way that we know. And that if we try to make everything about our faith reasonable, we're going to lose what's mysterious and supernatural and paradoxical and also emotional and effective. You know, kind of like Teresa, Blaise Pascal knows that we don't just know things intellectually. Sometimes the heart has its reasons, which reason doesn't understand. And much of Christianity is actually an experience and a feeling and a sensation, and it's a relationship with God through the mediator of Jesus. And so I always find Blaise Pascal a really important kind of transitional figure. As we move into the modern age, he gives us a way to hold on to the mystery of faith, even as we try to learn from science.
All right. And
I can't imagine who you are.
That's right, Chris. Who am I?
Hey, it is like looking in a mirror. You look like Dr. Chris Gehrz, history professor at Bethel.
Hi, I did not graduate from Bethel, so I'm breaking the string here. The person that I would include in my cloud of witnesses is somebody who's actually been deeply influential on me, deeply influential on my faith, and deeply influential on even on my academic career. And that is the 17th century pietist Philip Spener. We'll talk a lot about pietism later in this course as we start to talk about the Reformation and beyond. But one of the reasons why I'm really moved by Spener is because he's trying to bring life back to the Protestant movement. You know, about 150 years after Martin Luther begins the Reformation, and he does that by focusing Christianity on experience and not just on theology. One of the things you'll notice about me in this course is I tend to sometimes be critical of people who focus too much on the philosophers as the most important people and things like that. But I'm going to look at the people who are who look at faith and who look at ideas as things that need to not just be abstract, but things that need to be acted out. So faith in action and impacting the world becomes very important to Spener, and therefore becomes very important to me. Spener's also going to think a lot about education and what Christian education should look like. Another big idea from Spener is the idea that we need to approach disputes with what he would call an irenic spirit. And part of what we need to think about is Spainers living at a time when the world Christianity is being ripped apart with religious warfare. So not long after the 30 Years' War, we see Spener doing this, and he sees pietism as a way to sort of see hope in the world. So Spener is very important to me. And in fact, I'm having so much fun with this that I'd like to play a version of this game too. Sam, who am I? You are Philip Jacob Spener. Spener, who is in your cloud of witnesses? Well, I wrote my book, Pia Desideria, in the 1600s, and what I really wish is that someone would update it for the 21st century. So in my cloud of witnesses, I'm going to include Chris Gehrz, whose book, The Pietist Option, really does that. It's a great read. And in fact, I want to play this game. Sam, who am I? You are Chris Gehrz. Okay, I think we're too far deep in the Inception layers. That was
kind of an older version of Chris Gehrz there.
That's right.
I think his glasses changed halfway through, or I think he needs a haircut too. I'm not sure what I think about that. Well, that's just how we do segment 2. It's not always going to be heads on sticks, but it is a chance to take a different kind of perspective on some of the material we will cover or have covered in the class. So we'll be back in just a moment to wrap things up for this first webisode in summer 2020. All right, it is happy time on CWC PTI. Happy birthday to Lonesome Dove author Larry McMurtry, 84 years young. I had no idea Larry McMurtry was still alive. He seems like he's been 84 for like 30 years. Sam, whether it's Larry McMurtry or someone else, who is your favorite living novelist?
Well, I really struggled with this question, Chris, because I kept thinking of people, and then I'm like, oh, that person's dead too. That person's dead too. So I'm actually going to pick somebody genre-wise, maybe not too far away from Larry McMurtry, and age-wise, definitely not too far away from Larry McMurtry, and that is 86-year-old Cormac McCarthy. Oh. I'm a big Cormac McCarthy fan. The Blood Meridian it's a dark book, but it's a great book. Country for Old Men was a great book. The Road was a great book. All the Pretty Horses was a great book. I think I just named the books of his that I've read, but I really, really like him. He's somebody where if I found out if I found out he had a book coming out this week, like I know what I'd be doing this week, I would go read the Cormac McCarthy book.
Okay, sounds good.
Very nice. Well, happy anniversary to Gemini 4, the first multi-day space mission by American astronauts. It launched 55 years ago today. Chris, you have exactly 10 seconds to get me to care about this. Go.
Well, Amy, as I've been writing a biography of Charles Lindbergh, I've learned that flight has an amazing power to lift our horizons above the mundane and to get us a glimpse of immortality.
Okay, that did not work very well, but thank you. Thank you for training, and we'll be looking forward to your book when it comes out.
Ed White Spacewalk. That's the answer.
And happy trails to the spring semester of 2020. Amy, what single word best sums up this semester?
It is a word that does not play well on podcasts or videos, which is the word whew. W-H-E-W. Exclamation. So whew to me means like, whew, I'm glad it's over. Whew. It was actually relatively successful. Whew. I didn't lose any of my students, and whew, I never want to do that again. Whew.
I know. I feel like when we write the history of this era of higher, like it's a pretty remarkable achievement that colleges like this, like within a week or two, suddenly pivoted to doing this thing and got through it. Let us never speak of it again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you and goodbye.
Right. All right. Well, that's how we do these webisodes. I don't know if they'll be exactly like that, but pretty much quite a bit like that. And we'll again be doing 2 of these units, so usually like 1 a week, give or take. And so hopefully they're useful to you. Remember that you can always give us things to talk about, give us feedback by emailing Sam at Sam. What's your email address?
S-Mulberry at Bethel.edu.
All right, and reminder that you do have some things to do. We're recording this on June 3rd, 2 weeks before the class actually starts. You have plenty of time once you get into things. But remember, you do have to do a syllabus quiz, which you can take multiple times, so you should get 10 out of 10 on this. And you need to record your first 2-minute video response on Flipgrid, introducing yourself and reflecting on your experience of online learning. And then we'll take it from there. So any last thoughts, you two?
I just want to quick apologize to everyone at NASA and who cares about space, because I actually do really care about space.
I know. I made you play a role there. That's not you. You were watching the launch last Saturday. I understand.
It was a good introduction to students because we often have to take positions and play roles that we really don't personally agree with. But I mean, for the sake of academics.
That's right. It's all about learning. Sam, how do we finish these?
Well, we are so excited for this semester to begin, this summer semester. You're going to be seeing a lot of us, and we're going to be seeing a lot of you. We will catch you very soon, but until then, say goodnight, Stacy.